us who know what's going on in the world, if there ever was a time to talk about loving your enemy and what do our traditions have to say about that, it's now. Because there's so much tension in the world. At this Religion Communicators Council meeting that John just mentioned, I was at in Louisville, Kentucky, which, by the way, I didn't know they walked down the street at night, this big plaque about Thomas Merton, the time that he spent in that part of the country, and the work that he done. But there was a 3-day conference, not a big conference, but people concerned about different religious traditions talking about how do we communicate our messages. And every panel was somehow talking about the polarization.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much. So my name is Madana-gopāla. I'm very honored to be in the presence of all of you, who are renowned religious leaders, practitioners, academics, theologians, and scholars. I'm not an academic, nor an expert in philosophy or theology. I have a degree in geology, and I work in a bank. But still, I'm here in the capacity of the communications co-director for ISKCON of North America, and I've been requested to present something. So this is my second time here, and I'm just fascinated by the Vaishnava Christian dialogue. I thoroughly enjoyed last year's gathering, found it enlivening and incredibly enlightening. I have to say I'm in awe of the depth and breadth of spiritual knowledge that all of you bring to this event, and my most respectful pronounce to you. So, loving your enemy, a Vaishnava perspective. So this is from Matthew 5:44, very famous verse. Actually, just heard recently a recording of a lecture given by Martin Luther King on this verse. It's very beautiful. I'm sure you must have all heard it. And he said something like, "I'd rather die than hate anybody." It was really very powerful. So, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. It's Matthew. So when this topic was brought up last year, I felt it's such a profound and universal teaching. To err is human, to forgive is divine. But this teaching is something that goes beyond mere forgiveness. It is something that goes beyond conventional thought. It is radical. And what is divinity if not something radical? So I thought let's start with some definitions. We're talking about love your enemy. So what is love? There's a lot of nuances to these two words. In the context of love your enemy, the term love goes beyond mere affection or emotional attachment. It encompasses a selfless, unconditional, sacrificial concern for the well-being of someone else. This type of love is often referred to in Greek as agape, which is characterized by goodwill, kindness, compassion. Loving one's enemy involves treating them with kindness, forgiveness, and empathy, even in the face of hostility or harm. Now, enemy in this context is anybody who opposes, mistreats, or harms us in some way. They may hold animosity toward us, act aggressively, violently, pose a threat to our well-being. Enemies can be individuals. They can be groups of people. They can even be abstract concepts or ideologies that stand in opposition to our beliefs or values. That could be working definition. So, loving the enemy. What are some of the components of that? We take it apart. So there's forgiveness. Loving one's enemy involves forgiving them for any wrongs they've committed against us. It means letting go of feelings of resentment, bitterness, and desires for revenge. These are very natural feelings. Letting go. Instead of harboring hatred or seeking some retaliation, we extend forgiveness and seek reconciliation if possible. Then there's this idea of compassion. Now, compassion is empathy, you can say. So we want to empathize with their humanity, understand that they are like us. They're flawed individuals who also need grace and mercy. It's hard to do when someone is aggressive. It involves recognizing their inherent dignity and worth as human beings. You know, when someone is being quite aggressive, like sometimes you see an animal in the wild, it's so aggressive, and then you realize that maybe its foot is caught in a trap, and you want to help that little animal, but you try to help that person or animal, and they just bite you, but you still want to help them. And sometimes if you can overcome some of that and help them, that's real compassion. And of course, there's non-retaliation. Instead of responding with hostility, to further more hostility, one after another, tit for tat. Loving your enemies involves this kindness. You know, eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So instead, we seek to overcome evil with good, as the Apostle Paul writes in Romans 12:21. And then this is important, prayer. This is an important aspect of that verse that we read. Right? Jesus instructs his followers to pray for their enemies, including those who persecute them. Prayer is a powerful tool. It transforms our attitudes toward enemies. By praying for our enemies, we acknowledge our own need for God's grace and invite God to work in their lives as well. So in essence, this command, love your enemy, challenges us to transcend our natural inclinations toward hatred, resentment, retaliation. It calls us to embody the transformative power of love in our relationships, even to those who mistreat us. By loving our enemy, we emulate the unconditional love and mercy of God, who loves all people regardless of their attitudes. So coming to Bhagavad Gita, let's take a look at Arjuna. So those of you who are familiar, there's this story of Mahabharata, a very complicated story, but it's really one family, and two sides of the same family decide that the only way they can reconcile the differences is to have a massive war. And so on one side you have the Pandavas, and the other side you have Kauravas. And just before the war starts, the hero on the Pandavas' side, his name is Arjuna. He is distraught. He did not want to fight. One of his arguments was that it would not be a compassionate thing to go out and kill all these people, because he's actually very good at killing them. He had so much confidence, he had so much skill, he could wipe out everybody, but he didn't feel his right to do that. This is a powerful point that he made. And Srila Prabhupada, in his commentary, he actually glorifies this quality of soft-heartedness in one of the purports, that Arjuna, being genuine devotee, it's an admirable quality. Now, one of the subsequent purports, Prabhupada goes on to admonish that same compassion, says that it's a misplaced, foolish compassion. Very interesting. So love, and this is something I discussed with Patrick quite a bit, love does not necessarily preclude violence. There is a place for violence in the world, if applied rightly, can allow love to flourish. Very counterintuitive. Doesn't make sense right away. Jesus, for example, was not a pacifist. Matthew 10, he says, "Do not think I have come to bring peace." Very interesting. And I also learned from Patrick that Meher Baba tried to convince Gandhi to not force nonviolence on anybody. Don't force that concept. Don't jump the gun. If you're not mature and ready for it, don't do it. Now, Srila Prabhupada also had a similar critique of Mahatma Gandhi. Nonviolence is okay, but it doesn't always work. That when there's a need for violence, we don't hold back. Now, Arjuna here is facing the dilemma, right? And then, of course, Krishna speaks the highest message of universal love, message of not considering anyone your enemy at all. And yet he should still get up and fight. So what does that love mean then? What kind of loving arrow pierces the heart of the person standing in front of you? Love means one does not carry a personal grudge or animosity toward anyone. But that should not come in the way of performing one's duty. For example, okay, you have a scenario where a person has taken, say, a child hostage at gunpoint, standing there. And there's a sniper cop. Now, the sniper cop's responsibility is to take out the gunman, even if the criminal is the sniper's cousin. It is a cop's duty to take him out. That is, in fact, an act of love, even toward the criminal. Counterintuitive. Now, if he says, well, this is my cousin, then what is that? That's a sort of nepotic corruption. And that's what Arjuna is stuck with, you see. These are my cousins. How can I kill them? These are my gurus, my teachers. No, but it's your duty. You are the sniper cop. Your responsibility is to protect the society. That's love. Arjuna's older brother, Yudhishthir Maharaj. So now, Yudhishthir Maharaj, one of his names in the Bhagavatam is Ajatashatru. Ajatashatru means one who has no enemies. Now, this is not an easy concept to apply because, see, after the war, what happened? Arjuna, he did what he wiped everybody out. Yudhishthir won. He became the king. But he was so overcome by guilt. Now, this is after the war. That even after having won, he could not come out of his depression for having been the cause of death of so many millions of people. Even Krishna could not pacify him. Krishna tried. Of course, how Krishna works, he's God, so how can he fail? But see, Krishna in the heart was blocking his wisdom. And Krishna from outside was trying to put wisdom in Yudhishthira because he wanted to glorify a greater devotee, who was Bhishma. So what happened was that he wanted to give credit to Bhishma so that they went and visited Bhishma on his deathbed for final instructions. And when Yudhishthira heard from Bhishma about the transcendental loving position of the Lord, Yudhishthira finally understood that the people killed in the war actually received the direct mercy from Krishna, and they achieved immediate salvation. So he shouldn't be worried. So you can see this concept of loving the enemy in complex situations, and every situation is pretty much complex, if you think about it. It requires a little bit of depth of understanding. So we're going to explore this some more. How can we reconcile some of these paradoxes through the scriptures of the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita? We go back to the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj. So those of you who may not know the story, let me just summarize it. So Prahlad Maharaj, young boy, is only 5 years old in this picture, in this story. He was born to a demoniac king named Hiranyakashipu. Now this particular king had been given a boon that he is almost immortal. He could not be killed inside the house or outside. He cannot be killed in the daytime or at night, in the land, in the sky, in the water, by a man or a beast. He couldn't be killed by any weapon. So he thought he had covered all the bases and he'll never be killed. And then he was very powerful, and he was just raising hell everywhere, just havoc and torturing people, and he had taken over the whole universe. But his son was a devotee of Krishna, and his son was very saintly, having received some teachings from the great Guru Narad Muni. So now here we come to this scene where the son is in school, he's talking to his classmates, and then one other scene where Prahlad, he's speaking to his teachers. His teachers are employed by Hiranyakashipu to teach him, materialistic thinking. So Prahlad speaks to the teachers. this idea of enemy and friend. He says, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased with the living entity because of his devotional service, one becomes a pandita and does not make distinctions between enemies, friends, and himself. Intelligently, he then thinks, every one of us is an eternal servant of God, and therefore we are non-different from one another. Persons who always think in terms of enemy and friend are unable to ascertain the super soul within themselves. The super soul is Antaryami or Paramatma, God in the heart. Not to speak of them, even such exalted persons as Lord Brahma, who are fully conversant with the Vedic literature, are sometimes bewildered in following the principles of devotional service. The same Supreme Personality of Godhead who has created this situation has certainly given me the intelligence to take the side of your so-called enemy. So here Prahlad recognizes that even the most advanced minds, like the four-headed Lord Brahma, he has this massive computer brain, quad-core processor, and you can't always understand the nuances of applying bhakti in this idea of loving your enemy. It's not always an intellectual exercise. What is the essence of it? The essence, again, is that we are all children of God. That's what he's saying. And he is eternally with us in the hearts as Paramatma. Literally super soul. And no one is bereft of this privilege. There's no person who does not have the super soul in his heart. That's the basic truth. So even when Prahlad was tortured, his father tried to kill him and torture him. Prahlad did not take it personally. That's the crux of loving the enemy. Don't take it personally. Even though the other person may want you to take it personally. You see? Because he understood that his father does not know what he's doing. Then what happens, right? His father gets killed by the half-man, half-lion incarnation of Krishna. So it's neither man nor beast. He gets killed with body sticking half outside, half inside of the... There's a dusk time where it's neither day nor night. So, I figured out how to do it. Killed him. And then, so his father, right, has been killed by, he's torturing his son. But then, of course, Nrsingadev kills his father. And then the Lord asked Prahlad Maharaj, what benediction do you want? And Prahlad says this, please forgive my demon father for his inimical behavior toward me. It's not very different from Jesus Christ said, forgive them, my Lord, for they know not what they do. That's what he's saying. Even as he was being crucified, he's praying. He's praying for the well-being of the obvious enemy. It's the same concept. Pray for the enemy. About 500 years ago, one of the associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Haridas Thakur. Now, Haridas Thakur was actually born in a Muslim family. Of course, at that time, if you're born in a Muslim family, the Hindus won't want to talk to you or touch you, and so on. But Haridas Thakur had taken up this process of chanting Hare Krishna under the tutelage, guidance of Lord Chaitanya. He would even go from place to place with Nityananda Prabhu to preach this message of Godhead, message of chanting Hare Krishna. Now, because of this, the Qazi, the Muslim religious leader who was in charge of that area, he was also the political leader. He's a very powerful guy. He ordered Haridas Thakur to be executed by caning. Caning, you beat him to death. Like that was the order. Because you were born in a Muslim Khan family. Don't you have any sense of self-respect? And you're joining these backward Hindus and chanting whatever you're chanting. It's not acceptable. And Haridas said, well, we have converted so many Hindus to Islam. So maybe I'm just one guy, what's the big deal? He said, no, that's unacceptable. So he actually ordered him to be caned. And Haridas Thakur was literally caned in 22 marketplaces, very heavily. He did not die. because the Lord protected him. Now, even as he was being caned, he did not hate his persecutors. Srila Prabhupada often compared Haridas Thakur to Jesus Christ. At least 5 different places I found that he compared Haridas Thakur and Jesus Christ, very similar. He's being persecuted. His focus is on God. At the same time, his focus is also on forgiving and loving his persecutors. The Prabhupada says, Haridas Thakur was a great devotee who came into this material world to execute the will of the Lord by preaching the Lord's glories. But Haridas was punished at the hands of the Qazi by being beaten in 22 marketplaces. Similarly, Lord Jesus Christ was crucified and Prahlad Maharaj was put through so many tribulations. Now, Haridas Thakur bore no ill will toward the torturers. Rather, out of love and compassion for them, and upon their request, because what had happened, right? They had been beating Haridas Thakur. Right arm got tired, they started beating with his left arm. Nothing happened to Haridas. They fell at his feet because they were completely exhausted. 22 marketplaces. They were almost fainting. They were so exhausted. And they begged Haridas, why don't you die? If you don't die, we'll be in trouble. He'll kill us, or at least he'll get us fired. So they were really scared at this point. So out of compassion for them, and upon their request, he entered into samadhi, which is like a apparent death, just to save them. So he became limp. There's no pulse, nothing. And then they showed the dead body to the Qazi and threw it in the Ganga, the river. He did this just so they wouldn't be punished. Later on, he came back to life. You've heard that story also. I think similar thing. So it's an interesting parallel. I just found that very fascinating. Let's look at Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna exemplifies loving your enemy in different ways, in different yugas. So what are yugas? Yugas are time scale, or you can say ages. Like there's a golden age, and then there's a bronze age, and there's an iron age. So these ages last hundreds of thousands of years. So there are 4 ages. Satya Yuga, which is the nicest one. Things go really nice. People live very long. They're very healthy. People are very congenial to each other. The next one is Treta Yuga, where things start declining a little bit, but overall it's pretty decent. And then Dwapara Yuga gets pretty bad, and Kali Yuga is the worst. It's the age of iron, where it's basically just quarrel and hypocrisy is a predominant trait of this yuga. So that's the yuga that we're in, the cycle that we're in. Kind of like the 4 seasons, and they keep repeating again and again. Right? So, in the 9th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says that he is inimical to no one. And he's not partial to anyone, but he reciprocates with them as they approach him. So say in the previous yugas, right, Krishna, like in Dwapara Yuga, Krishna kills his enemies. But he grants them liberation at the same time. Like this is a classic one. The classic example is Putana. He killed her when he was just a little baby. She came to kill him by poisoning him, but he killed her. That's a classic example. But it is understood that even though he killed her, she got immediate salvation and went straight to the kingdom of God. She didn't have to be punished for it. Her only punishment was this momentary pain of death, whatever, that fear that she faced, and then immediately she wakes up in the kingdom of God for eternity to serve him in eternal bliss, right? Another example is this fellow here, Shishupal. So Krishna kills him with the Sudarshan Chakra. That's his disc weapon. This separates his head from his shoulders. He was a pretty demoniac guy. But everybody who was there witnessed, physically they saw Shishupal's soul leave his body and enter into Krishna's body. So it symbolizes that, he got salvation as well. In the public assembly, everybody saw him. So Krishna killed. In fact, in the Ramayana, we have the 4 brothers, Lord Ram, Lakshman, Bharat, and Shatrughna. These are 4 expansions of the Lord. The name Shatrughna literally means one who kills the enemy. Shatru means enemy, Ghna means a killer. So in the previous yugas, Krishna in his expansion, they killed. But so we see killing is an act of, we can call it tough love. Because they don't really die. Nobody really dies, right? And his body's never really alive. So in that sense, it's more like a holodeck that we're stuck in, if you're familiar with Star Trek analogy. It's just, virtual reality. So it's a game. It's to kind of correct us. In the age of Kali that we are in, the age of hypocrisy, the age of quarrel, age of darkness, things are a little different. So in this age, practically everybody has inimical tendencies in their heart. In this age, the Lord does not engage in killing, even when he incarnates as Lord Chaitanya. So here you have these 2 criminals called Jagai and Madhai. They're actually incarnations of Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, the same demons we showed earlier. Right? Now these criminals, they're the worst kind. They regularly committed the most heinous and violent acts. So once Lord Nityananda, who is the expansion of the Lord, and he is also Godhead, but he's spreading the name of God. And he was going to the marketplace and requesting them, my dear brothers, please just sing the names of God. Sing the holy name, Hare Krishna, chant. Now in a drunken rage, they attacked Nityananda Prabhu violently until he's bleeding. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard this, that Nityananda was attacked, he came roaring to the scene. Where is he? What happened? Who has hit my Nityananda? And he lifted his hand and invoked his Sudarshan Chakra. Nobody had ever seen that in this age of Kali. That Sudarshan Chakra can wipe out anybody. Now, Lord Nityananda Prabhu, he stopped Lord Chaitanya. He says, my Lord, I have to remind you, in this age of Kali, pretty much everybody has some degree of impurity in their hearts. Who are you going to kill? And who are you going to spare? You have to wipe out everybody. In this age of Kali, the only weapon, my Lord, is compassion. Compassion, spreading the joyous chanting process. So then what happened? The evil brothers, Jagai and Madhai, were forgiven. They were not killed. They had a change of heart. In fact, it is said that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he embraced the brothers. And although Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's body was a glowing golden color, for a brief moment, when he embraced them and relieved them of their mountains of sin, his body turned blackish, as if to kind of symbolize the darkness that's, been sucked out of them. So this is the mercy of the Lord in this particular age. So this is also loving the enemy. This is a more clear example. The other one, when you're killing, it seems counterintuitive, but it's all loving the enemy. So the brothers, they actually ended up becoming very advanced and pure devotees of the Lord upon having received this loving compassion, even though they were originally inimical. So then I kind of started looking for some references in scripture for this concept. In Bhagavad Gita 6:9, Krishna says, he introduces the concept of seeing friends and enemies with equal vision. He says, a person is considered still further advanced when he regards honest well-wishers, affectionate benefactors, the neutral, mediators, the envious, friends and enemies, the pious and the sinners, all with an equal mind. Is that practical? Is it possible? This seems beautiful to frame and put on your wall. Prabhupada writes in another purport, he highlights how this mental equilibrium can't be achieved artificially. He says, for a man in the practical world who has to fight so many opposing elements, it is certainly very difficult to control the mind. Artificially, one may establish a mental equilibrium toward both friend and enemy. But ultimately, no worldly man can do so. He's saying you can't do it. It looks nice when you put it, when you read it, but right? For this is more difficult than controlling the raging wind. Arjuna is the one famously who says this verse. Chanchalam hi mana krishna pramati balavadrinam tasyaham nigraham manye vayu reva sadushkaram. The mind is so fickle. Forget about seeing friend and enemy as the same. The mind is so fickle, it can't even stay still in one place for petty things. Try to control it's like controlling the raging wind with your bare hands. So the question may be asked, how can we apply this principle as practicing spiritualists? How exactly am I supposed to put this command into practice? What exactly does this look like in the modern context? The smallest thing irritates us, what to speak of actual inimical folks. Right? So let's go to Srimad Bhagavatam, the 6th canto. Prabhupada brings up something that I found quite fascinating. The conditioned soul has friends and enemies. He's affected by the good qualities and the faults of his position. This is part of being conditioned. The Supreme Lord, however, is always transcendental. Because he is the Ishvara, the Supreme Controller, he is not affected by that duality. It may therefore be said that he sits in the core of everyone's heart as the neutral witness of the causes and effects of one's activities, good and bad. We should also understand that udasina, the neutrality of the Lord, does not mean that he takes no action. Rather, it means that he is not personally affected. For example, a court judge is neutral when two opposing parties appear before him, but he still takes action as the case warrants. To become completely neutral, indifferent to material activities, we should simply seek shelter at the lotus feet of the supreme neutral person. So this is highlighted here. This neutrality, or transcending the duality, is not possible on our own merit, on our own strength. We have to take shelter of the supreme neutral person. Just like we can't pull ourselves out of the ocean. Somebody has to pull us out, right? From a helicopter or something. So Krishna says, this is Krishna's nature, right? He is naturally free from enmity, as we discussed. I hate no one, 929. He loves everybody equally. He reciprocates fairly without partiality. So this is Krishna's nature. But how can we achieve that nature? He gives the clue in 4:10. He says, Vitaraga bhaya krodha manmaya mamapashita bahavo jnana tapasa puta madbhavamagata. That many, it's not just one or two rare individuals. Many people have attained madbhava. Madbhava means what? Bhava can mean like feeling or nature. In this case, you can say my nature, which is what? The nature of loving everybody equally while still reciprocating fairly. So this is the essence what Krishna is trying to convey. When you love equally, doesn't mean that your reciprocation has to be then blanket same. The reciprocation is equal. If one child gives one more attention, then I give more attention. It's just natural. It's a fair reciprocation, right? Father, mother loves all the children equally. I hate no one. I'm not partial, but I reciprocate fairly. Now, when we give up raga, bhaya, krodha, attachment, fear, and anger, these qualities that bring us down, and we surrender to Krishna, then it is possible to develop this divine nature. And it's not just one or two. Bahavo, he says. So many have done it. It's a standard process. Upliftment of the soul is actually very natural because that's the original position of the pure soul. And we are all by nature position, pure souls. Right? Many have attained it. So, loving your enemy. The principle of loving your enemy is a divine calling to our higher nature. It is unconventional, radical, and places the importance of mercy and forgiveness far above even the noble principle of justice. Justice is noble. Mercy and forgiveness is higher. And higher still is the compassionate love. Now, it is not really possible for us conditioned souls to practice this artificially, without being fully in touch with the Supreme Lord, who is the embodiment of this sense of loving mercy and compassion. So in an age of meaningless quarrel, senseless violence, this entire world will benefit tremendously if even a small percentage of the population would embrace this concept and begin to apply it sincerely in some way and form in their lives. How do we do it? We can take shelter of so many instructions given by the Lord in the Bible, the Bhagavatam, the Gita, and so many scriptures. It's all there. It's the same message. Stories are so similar. I mean, I just discovered this parallel of Haridas Thakur just last week. This is like so cool. And it depends on our connecting deeply with him, with Krishna, in devotion and dedicated service. So it's a gradual process. Krishna says, Shanai Shanai. It's going to be gradual, but it's progressive. We're invited to be progressive in our approach to God. The good news is we have a lot of time because it's an eternal process. But if you want to make real progress, then you want to invest a sense of urgency in it so that you can do it in this one life. So that's our goal. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.